Welcome to another visit here at the Alaska SeaLife Center in Seward, Alaska. We are so thankful that you have joined us for another episode of our virtual visit series. I'd like to thank you all for being here. This is actually going to be our last episode for 2021, but Alex and virtual visits will return in the new year on January 19th. I'm Shauna, and I'm here with several friends today and hosting in Alex's place. So I would like to give a big thank you to our sponsors, the Royal Caribbean Group, for making these visits possible and for their continued support. And I'd like to acknowledge that we all live and work on the land of the Alutiiq people. So just a little recap for you about what happened last week. Or actually, you know what? First, let's do the sunrise cam that Alex always shows you. Let's take a look at that. All right, so here our sunrise right now is at about 9:56 a.m. And our sundown is around 3:45, so we have just a little less than 6 hours of daylight. It is all of our first winter in Alaska, and so every day is a new adventure for us, but it is certainly the sunrises like this that make us truly appreciate where we are. All right, so now let's recap what we saw last week. Last week you were with Taylor, and she talked to you about otters. So you got to meet Poppy and see her journey through rehab, and you also got to meet Zippy and Hook, who were two male adult otters that were actually released out into Resurrection Bay. So if you're in Alaska, you can still see them today swimming around out there. So today, I have an otter with me who is a little less furry than the ones you saw last week, and that is because we are talking about bones this week. So here at the Alaska SeaLife Center, we have a large collection of bones and skeletons. So we're going to talk about why we have these, a little bit of the process on how to prepare these bones, and finally we are going to assemble a full-size Steller sea lion skeleton today. So first, let's just talk a little bit about what animals we have here with me. So all of these things we have, first and foremost, for educational purposes. And the other reason would be that you may know that we're our aquarium. You may know that we have the rehab, but we're also a research facility. So these bones can be really useful in research as well. All right? And finally, look at them. They're just cool. So first we have here, this is a baby harbor seal. All right? So he's pretty delicate, pretty fine little bones. And then in contrast, we have right here a walrus skull. This guy, I'm not going to pick up. He is really heavy. It kind of takes two of us to do that. Then next we have here a puffin, which is one of my favorite birds at the SeaLife Center. And you can see that they have a much more delicate skeleton than, say, the walrus or the harbor seal that you just saw. I also have here with me a whole bunch of skulls. So let's just start out with kind of seeing what the size difference are. So just to give you a familiar idea, this one here, this is a domesticated house cat, all right? And then this one here is a medium-sized dog. So just to give you an idea of what probably you have one of these at home as a pet, kind of what the size of their skull is. Then next to that, I have, if you guys have ever seen, an albatross skull. So it's about the same size as a cat skull if you don't count like the length of the beak, all right? But this skull, because it is a bird and they need to fly, it is much lighter than the cat skull. I've also got both a river otter and a sea otter. You can kind of see that the river otter skull is slightly smaller than the sea otter. And then just to give you some other animals here to be familiar with, this guy, this is the skull of a brown bear, which are pretty common in Alaska. And the bone of a moose, another common animal we see here. Obviously, if this is his jaw, moose are pretty big. That's why here in Alaska, people are pretty cautious of moose. Then we're going to have a harbor seal, and this is one of the animals that we actually have here that you can see swimming around, and our Steller sea lion as well. For those of you who don't live in Alaska, you are probably more familiar with the California sea lion, so you can see it's somewhere in between size of the harbor seal and the Steller sea lion. You saw this guy at the beginning, our male otter. So this is a full-size male otter, and he's been put together to kind of simulate what they would look like when they are floating in the water, where they spend most of their time grooming themselves and eating. And then I also have up here a couple of whale vertebrae. So if you can kind of feel on your back the size of your vertebrae, can you imagine that this is just one piece of a whale spine? So obviously, they are pretty substantial animals. But how did we get these bones to look like this? So we're going to go through a little bit of what that process is. First, they have to be cleaned, and there are 4 ways in which bones are cleaned. There's cold water mastication, hot water mastication, there's a bug box or bug room, and then natural decay. So for cold water mastication, that basically just consists of soaking the bones in a cold water for an extended period of time. After they have been in there for a while, then the tissues are going to be able to be scraped off. This process, however, does take a pretty considerable amount of time, depending on the skull. So it can take anywhere from 1 to 4 months just for one bone. In contrast, we have hot water mastication, which is basically boiling of the bones. So this is much quicker. Oftentimes, the tissue can be removed within 2 days. But if you're going to be using your bones for scientific purposes, this may not be the best approach because the boiling does cause a little bit of shrinkage in the bones. Next, we have the bug room or the bug box. So you can create a bug box or bug room from almost anything, even as simple as a coffee can, depending on the size of, obviously, the colony that you have. So what that consists of is something called a dermestid beetle, and we use both the adults and the larvae, and they are a flesh-eating beetle. You can kind of see a picture of one of those now. This is very blown up. They are not anything that you would really see much. But they eat the flesh. The larvae actually eat a lot more, so it's much more efficient if you can have more larvae than adults. They like it to be warm, so we want to keep that box or room at about 80 degrees. They also like it to be very consistent in temperature. So we try and have not a lot of fluctuation. And with all that occurring, depending on the size of the bone, and again, the size of your colony, how many you have actually consuming, that can take anywhere from several days to several weeks. So you saw in the video where we scanned some additional bones that we have here that we couldn't bring out. The first one that you saw was a harbor porpoise, then you saw an albatross, and last you saw a beluga whale. So whales require an additional cleaning process called degreasing. So whale bones have oil inside of them, which acts as an additional nutrient for them while they are living and also assists with their buoyancy. But that needs to be removed before they can be put on display or used because it could go rancid and smell bad. So the way that that is removed is we use a mixture of soapy water, acetone, and hydroxide ammonium. And they're going to soak in that for about 5 to 7 days, and then that should get rid of most of the oil at that point. Finally, in order to be able to get to a place where you see all of these bones where they're nice and white, they're going to go through a bleaching process. So to do that, we are simply just soaking the bones in bleach. It's going to be for, again, another probably 4 to 6 days. And what that's going to do is remove any of the still tissue that is on there, any of the oils, and they're going to come out much whiter and much cleaner. So you're just going to rinse them off with fresh water, and then they're ready to go. For us, using them for educational purposes, where they're going to be touched a lot, we do an additional process for preserving where they are covered in polyurethane or like a glue and water mixture so that it helps keep them a little bit safer while they're being handled. So that is kind of the process that we go through. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Shauna, do you have a minute to take a couple
absolutely.
questions? Awesome. So one of our questions that we received was, how strong are the bones, and have they ever gotten broken here?
Yes, so these bones are very similar to your bones. So just like you can break a bone, these bones can be broken. And they actually are a little more fragile because they don't have the muscles and the tissues to protect them still. So you can actually see on this harbor seal where he's been dropped, and we simply just glued him back together. So yep, it does happen, but we try to be really careful with them.
What about, have you ever cleaned bones here at the SeaLife Center?
We have. So on occasion, our rehab team will receive in an animal that is deceased, and or we have an animal here that is injured and can't recover. So the scientific team will perform a necropsy, and then once that is done, which is what they use to like examine the tissues and the soft organs, then it will be put into a bug box, which we have here. So that for us is the best process for the team we have.
Ooh, just got in another one. What other kinds of bones do you have here that are not out today?
I am so glad you asked. So we have lots of different kinds of bones. We could never bring them all out here today. We have some porcupines, we have some lynx, we have all different kinds of birds, puffins, mirrors. But let me walk over here and show you. Right here, this is a minke whale skull. So just to kind of give you some idea, I mean, it's almost as big as my whole arm span. So this guy is gigantic. And then we also have here a whale vertebrae and a beaked whale skull. So again, you can see that with whales, we're talking about pretty substantial animals. And again, we have lots of other things here as well. So here at the Alaska SeaLife Center, one of our favorite animals that people like to come and see are our harbor seals, or any of our ice seals, and our Steller sea lions. So just to give you, again, we kind of looked at these briefly, but to give you a little bit better of an idea, this is the harbor seal, all right? And this, in comparison, is going to be our Steller sea lion. So ice seals, which you will see are here, are the smallest of the seals, and then Steller sea lions are the largest of the sea lions. So there's quite a bit of difference. So just in a minute, we are going to go over to Taylor and some of my other friends to do the actual assembly of the skull. But while we do that, let's just give you a quick look at Tuck, our baby harbor seal, who's probably more of the size of this guy over here, as well as Pilot and Kuliak, to give you just an overall idea of what these creatures look like when they are living.
Shauna did such a great job of showing you all of the bones that we have here at the SeaLife Center. So behind me, you may see a metal frame. Now this metal frame behind me is what we are going to be using to assemble a juvenile Steller sea lion. And so Winack, who is the Steller sea lion that you saw playing with the little rainbow ice treat, that's about the same size as this sea lion that we're going to be building. So as Shauna was showing all of the bones and skeletons that are put together with pins and are in more of a permanent display, this Steller sea lion behind me with these frames is going to be kind of a puzzle. This is used for educational purposes here, where we can take apart the sea lion, put the sea lion back together, find out which bones go together and which ones definitely don't, because we had quite the time putting it together. So I'm going to be showing you a couple time-lapse videos here in a second. It was a difficult process, so it took many different hands, so I'm thankful to Caitlin and Isabella, who are going to be putting together the Steller sea lion behind me, and take a look at these videos. So as you can see here, we took the pairs of ribs and matched them together, and then we matched them from smallest to largest in the middle, and then as it tapers down back in the rib cage. So you are also seeing that we're putting the convex side up, and that is the easiest way. So whenever this animal is swimming in the water, it makes it a little bit more hydrodynamic. That way, as the water comes over this rib cage, it goes over it and doesn't collect, which is why the concave side of these ribs bones are on the underside. Also, you'll notice that the double-headed rib, where the two heads at the top, is going to be connecting to the spine, which is next, and the single head is going to be connecting to the sternum, which is the breastbone. So we made that look super easy, but here come Caitlin and Isabella putting on the rib cage onto our juvenile Steller sea lion. So next, let's go through the spine. As you can see us building this spine right here, we're looking at the spinous process, which is that pointy part there at the top of the spine. And we are matching all of those together, going to be going from the cervical spine, which is up towards Shauna, far left, and then all the way down to the lumbar spine. So currently, Shauna is working on the cervical spine, far left, thoracic in the middle, lumbar at the back. And we have the sacrum and the caudal spine, sacral spine and the caudal spine there. And here comes the spine. So many of you are probably wondering how we have this Steller sea lion skeleton. So a little bit of history on this sea lion. The project in and of itself is called Project Winack, as Winack means sea lion in the native language Alutiiq. This male juvenile sea lion was found in the summer of 2001 by boaters in Day Harbor, which is one bay over from Resurrection Bay right outside here. Now, whenever these boaters spotted the sea lion, they called the Alaska SeaLife Center, so they called us, and the Kenai Fjords National Parks vessel, and they collected the carcass and brought it to the Alaska SeaLife Center for a necropsy, which is basically an autopsy that is specifically for animals. Now, the necropsy uncovered that Winack was juvenile with no signs of trauma, but did suggest the cause of death to be starvation. So Winack represents the puzzling dilemma of Steller sea lion decline. So in order to further investigate this decline of Steller sea lions, our team has taken part in a research project known as Chiswell Island Research. You can see Chiswell Island right here on the screen. So this study has been gathering data since 1998. And we know that since the 1970s, the Steller sea lion population in Alaska has declined by about 80%. And scientists are trying to figure out why. Chiswell Island, which you're seeing here, is a huge key sea lion haul-out and rookery located here in Resurrection Bay. As part of the research project, we have these cameras mounted on the island, and they're monitored about 20 hours a day, and the footage you're seeing right here was from this past summer, giving us a closer look at the Steller sea lions without actually disturbing them. The sea lions are then tracked by various markings on their body, and we have accumulated a database of more than 700 Steller sea lions since the start of this study. Super important that we have this in order to give us insight as to how many animals are returning to the rookery each year. So, as you can see, we are finished with the Steller sea lion. And so we're going to switch over to a different camera angle after I answer a couple of questions. But first, let's hear it.
All right, so we had a question. Someone wanted to know, where do the beetles normally live? So actually, they have a wide range of habitats. The adults move around and then to different decaying bodies, and then they're going to leave the larva in those various bodies, and then once they're adults, they're going to transfer to somewhere else. Another question we have is, how many vertebrae does a Steller sea lion have? And let's see, there are, as far as in the front section, there's 7. There's 5 in the thoracic, 5 in the lumbar. So that probably adds up. It's around 27. Wow. Plus the tail.
So, we are going to switch over to our other camera angle here. That way we can get a little bit of a closer look at all of the bones you're seeing here. So once the necropsy has taken place, we had the opportunity to take x-rays of the sea lion. That way, this helps us whenever we are determining the right way to put together the sea lion again. We have these x-rays to go off of, which I think is super awesome. So you can see the front right flipper, but there's the left rear, right rear flipper. You can see we have basically a night at the museum here as we look at all of our skeletons that are around. Here's the back angle. You can see the tail. Very cool. Now, I want to be honest with you guys. This took us about 4 hours the very first time we put it together, and now we've been a lot quicker in making it possible. But yeah, this is so great. We had such a wonderful time putting this together, and we thank you so much for joining us today.
Yep, we really appreciate the continued support for virtual visits. Like we mentioned before, this is going to be our last episode in 2021, but Alex and virtual visits are going to return next year on January 19th. And I just want to give a big thank you to Taylor, as well as Isabella and Caitlin. This was definitely a team effort, and we absolutely could not have taken on this task without everyone.
Absolutely. And we want to wish you all a happy holiday season. Bye.